Maintenant la séance.
We will begin our meeting. Welcome to meeting number 13 of the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs of the House of Commons.
1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on September 18, 2025. The committee is resuming its study on suicide prevention among veterans. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Before we continue, I would ask all in-person participants to consult the guidelines written on the cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and to protect the health and safety of all participants, including our interpreters. I would like to make a few comments for the benefits of our witnesses that are with us today and you members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking, and for those participating by video conferences, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can selection the appropriate channel for interpretation, either floor, English, or French. And for those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair.
For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For those on Zoom, please use the raised hand function. The committee clerk and myself will do our best to maintain the speaking order, and we thank you for your patience and your understanding in this regard.
I would now like to welcome our witnesses. I know you're in Australia, so first I want to say thank you very much for both of you. We have Professor Ben Wandam, Flinders University, and the Director of Open Door, Improving the Well-Being of Veterans, Public Safety Personnel and their families with us. And from the Government of Australia's Department of Veterans Affairs, Professor Jonathan Lane, Chief Psychiatrist. Thank you for being with us again, and we will start by giving each of you approximately 5 minutes to present your opening remarks. The rest of the hour will be dedicated to a question and answer session with the members of the committee. So I would like to start by Professor Wandam. I would invite you to start for 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bonjour. I'm Professor Ben Wandam. I'm the Director of Open Door, Improving the Wellbeing of Veterans, Public Safety Officers, Personnel and their families in South Australia. I'm a veteran. I served in the Australian Defence Force.
There you go.
Okay.
Yes, you went on
mute. Did you get it? Yeah. All right. I guess where I finished off. I served in the Australian Defence Force 1987 till 1995. I had a very good career, obviously with some absolute brilliant experiences and some difficult experiences as you do in the military. I began really researching the military very strongly in 2003, so I've been doing that for 20 years, and I've focused on some issues that really address the issue of veteran suicidality. Currently conducting an Australian Research Council discovery project called Veteran Suicide, Investigating the Social and Historical Dimensions. This is the main focus of our research, is to encapsulate the biopsycho elements of the research, but to really provide a different perspective or a more holistic perspective by looking at the social implications of veteran suicidality. So that means that we know that people will come out of deployment or even have experiences in service that may expose them to trauma, but that we can increase our preventative efforts by focusing on some really key issues. And one of them is transition. Transition is a key point of opportunity and challenge, and we need to ensure that we have the right systems and services in place to do that. We've recently had a Royal Commission in Australia, and that certainly has been one of their main recommendations, is to produce a very strong transition element. The research that I've done has looked at veterans that have been overseas or in service, and there are a number of reasons why they are led to consider or to contemplate taking their own lives. There is two issues. There is the deployment and the service side of things, but then there is also the institutional side of things. I think it's a very main point, and it's one that when we testified to the Royal Commission, it was an absolute central point that we have to look at systems and cultures as much as we look at the more accepted issues around deployment. So issues of system and culture mean that we have to look at the way in which the military justice system is used. Recently in Australia, we've had an inquiry into the weaponisation of the military justice system, which I sat on. The key point there is that in any military, there is significant command discretion, and there's a strong class system between commissioned and non-commissioned officers, and then that, if is not regulated effectively, can lead to the exploitation of that power, and then leading to bad outcomes for our veterans. So, while PTSD is a very significant issue for veterans, particularly that are exposed to trauma, the other side of things is institutional betrayal and moral injury. So another big focus of the Royal Commission, and one which we brought to the Royal Commission, was that we have to look at not just what we expect when we join the military, that is the costs of war, but we also have to incorporate an understanding of the costs of service. The Royal Commission has had 122 recommendations, and they're focused on things such as national study into military sexual assault, the establishment of an independent body, that's recommendation 122, that's to oversee the recommendations and the rolling out, and also to hear other issues that come forth at the time. We've looked at just moving transition away from defence and into the TVA. We've looked at a wellbeing work group that will oversee wellbeing. We have also looked at the reconstruction of the veteran sector. So we've got a peak body. We're looking at developing a peak body to oversee that. There's a whole range of other sort of issues as well. For example, veteran employment is a big piece. And that's the focus that we bring to this area, is that there may be mental health issues, but if we can get employment, education, housing, mobility, identity, purpose and belonging right, then that is a major preventative issue for veteran suicidality. I would say in my research, over 300 interviews now, social disconnection is, for me, the overwhelming issue. And that is an issue that we can prevent really effectively just by wrapping services and knowledge and wisdom and experience and empathy around veterans when they're in service and when they leave service, and even years after their service when they're well into their civilian lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Wadham. I would like to invite Professor Lane for 5 minutes, please.
Bonjour and good morning, Madam President, and members of the committee. So, as some background, like Ben, I joined the Army at the ripe old age of 17 in 1989 and had 10 years as a soldier. And during that time, I did an arts degree, English Lit and Psychology part-time, and then an honours degree in psychology before being sponsored as a full-time medical student with the Army, and then served with the Army as a doctor for a period of time before then transferring to the reserves and doing my training as a psychiatrist. I deployed to Afghanistan in 2013 and was embedded at the Royal 3 in Kandahar as a mental health provider. After finishing my fellowship, I completed a PhD looking at culturally specific transdiagnostic and peer-led programs for military veterans and emergency services personnel. And this, along with my other clinical work, ended up being involved in the Royal Commission into Veteran Suicide, the same as Ben, and eventually I started working with our Veterans Affairs Department, and last year in last year in July, the Secretary, Alison Frame, created the position of Chief Psychiatrist, and I was appointed to that. My work, in my clinical work, and my history and engagement as a soldier and then as a doctor and then as a psychiatrist, I've had to be deeply involved in suicide and suicidality because it's so commonly associated with mental health problems. But as Ben identified, there are also a number of other factors when we look at this particular population group, and service culture, cultural conditioning, and service identity are key factors that need to be addressed. And as Ben also identified, those become vulnerabilities either when service systems and processes are weaponized, and this also includes military sexual abuse, but then when the person themselves transitions out and how they navigate that process, which is actually a transition of identity, a transition of community, and a transition of culture, along with needing to find some new sense of purpose and meaning. And this can be particularly difficult when the person has mental health concerns or other physical injuries and wounds and things like that. My work in the department around suicide and suicidality has come from a number of different positions. And this is primarily because as a psychiatrist, obviously mental health and suicide is not an uncommon thing. And that was something I saw firsthand in my uniform service as well. When we're talking about suicide, we absolutely need to talk at the individual level, but we also need to include community, as Ben identified, and then services and processes from the government and from the wider health systems themselves. Suicide itself, like in Australia, for example, our Australian Institute of Health and Welfare has been collecting our suicide data for defence and the veterans community since 2017, and the figures for 2023 were 78 serving and ex-serving members who unfortunately died by suicide. And this is actually lower than it has been in previous years, and the numbers have been trending down, which does suggest that we're doing something good. But the problem with these numbers, even though that's a high figure, is that they're actually relatively low. And suicide in general is really significantly complex and very nuanced in terms of what happens when, how, and why in particular. And, the data that we've seen from Australia shows that up to 70% of people who do end up dying by suicide aren't actually engaged in our Veterans Affairs system at all. And so whilst it's really important to have veteran-friendly services, we also need to ensure that services in the wider system, both in the public and the private system, are engaged in things as well too. One of the things I'm very proud to say that I've been working on and with is our department's National Suicide Prevention Plan, and this was being developed in conjunction with the National Suicide Prevention Office for Australia and their plan as well. And I've provided copies of that to the clerk that we can discuss at a later date or for your information and things too. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you again, and thank you for your service to your country, sir. We've been looking forward to hear your perspective from Australia. So on that note, I will invite MP Wagenthal for 6 minutes to start the conversation.
Well, thank you so much, Chair, and thank you for being here today. I'm very excited to be able to ask you some questions. We have a lot in common, Canada and Australia, and an issue that I have been exposed to for the last decade, actually, is the mental health impacts of those of our serving members and veterans now who were exposed to mefloquine. And I noticed in recommendation number 61, you talk specifically about establishing a brain injury program that covers, and you talk about the various sections of the military, but you also say, and serving and ex-serving members exposed to mefloquine and or tafloquine. So in response to number B, can you explain to me, you say, assess and treat neurocognitive issues affecting serving and ex-serving members, whatever the cause. Has the Australian government, Veterans Affairs, identified specifically mefloquine toxicity as a cause in treating mental health and brainstem injuries?
Thank you, and that's an interesting question. And both mefloquine and tafenoquine were prescribed and used during our Australian campaigns in the Southeast Asia and Pacific areas as well. And there was a significant amount of distress in the 2000s about the potential harms from both of these medications. And as a result of that, a cognitive testing program was actually established. Unfortunately, it wasn't taken up very well, and there wasn't a significant amount of data that's come from that. That sort of research and that era, though, has then led to, one of the signature sort of issues around service in the military, and in particular during periods of high operational tempo. And so Australia, just like Canada, the Great War on Terror has meant, 2 decades of exposure to significant low-level blast injuries and potential traumatic brain injuries as well, too.
Sure.
And
if I can just interrupt, I'm sorry. I want to ask on that then. You indicate that with this particular issue that there should you should record members' exposure to traumatic brain injury and minor traumatic brain injury, including in medical records. So obviously, it has been established that mefloquine does cause a brainstem injury. So those that have had concerns, do you have actual records then indicating that they were impacted by taking that particular anti-malaria drug?
No, I'm afraid we don't, as far as I'm aware.
Why
no.
would that be?
Basically, long story short, there are a range of potential causes for cognitive decline, and then various other sorts of injuries as well too. And when you're talking about cognitive functioning, that was the primary complaint about people who are being prescribed those medications. But the actual mechanism of injury for a physical injury, like the blast from a blast overpressure that might cause mild traumatic brain injury, or something more significant, causes physical lesions because of the physical mechanism of injury, as opposed to a pharmacological or chemical or hormonal or so on.
Yeah, I do understand that. The reality is that there is information significant around the world now in regard to this. So I would love to see Canada do far more to identify and to take responsibility for our soldiers who have been impacted by that drug, since Somalia for sure, right up until Afghanistan. And now our Surgeon General has indicated it is a drug of last resort rather than first resort. So I appreciate that. I think that we need to work together on this particular issue. But that being said, I have a question then about one of the other issues around privacy. You did in this study, I'm trying to find the right one. There are so many amazing recommendations here. Recommendation 74, clarify the application of the Privacy Act to veterans to determine whether amendments are necessary. Quite often, when at this committee, we're trying to determine how many veterans have been in certain circumstances and whatnot. We often hear, well, we can't really know because, it's up to them. We don't have that opportunity because of the Privacy Act. Is this something then that you're also experiencing?
Absolutely, and it's the bane of my life as an academic and as a clinician, and as a member of our Department of Veterans Affairs. And when we talk about privacy, this includes how serving personnel, their health records, how that data, because that data can't leave defence, unfortunately. And so that means that when someone leaves defence, that data then gets given to them on a file, but that's it. So there's no systemic records that are actually kept and then going forward as well too. And we don't have a veteran specifier or identifier, so we can't track healthcare usage and various other things as well too.
So can I ask on that point, have you considered, or is there a way, if you were to look at this privacy issue, to give people leaving and becoming veterans the opportunity to make that a requirement that, yes, they agree and that they want that privacy to be somewhat limited in the ability of Veterans Affairs to deal with their needs after they leave service.
Very briefly, sir, because we've had expire our time, so I'll leave you maybe 10 seconds, please, to answer Mrs. Wagenthal.
So yes, very much so. And people leaving Defence have a veteran identifier in terms of their card so that they can access services because of that. And then we can collect, health usage data around that.
Thank you very much, Professor. Mr. Casey, for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being with us. It's a challenge for that to happen from the other side of the globe, and we appreciate your interest in our study that you've made that effort. Appreciate it very much. We had a witness testify before us a couple of days ago who is passionate about psilocybin-aided therapy. And he basically pointed to Australia as the global gold standard for the implementation and acceptance of this. So I'd be interested to know a bit more about it. What is the status of psilocybin-assisted therapy in your country? And the second part of that question, if you could, can you take us through how you were able to get social license for this to happen? Because there is undoubtedly a stigma in this country around psychedelics, a stigma around alternative therapies. Just be interested in the Australian experience in that regard.
Thank you, sir. That's a very interesting question and a very timely question, because our Therapeutic Goods Administration allowed the use of psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression and MDMA, the party drug, for treatment-resistant post-traumatic stress disorder. And this is effectively under clinical trial type conditions and as a means of last resort. And our Department of Veterans Affairs opened up applications to fund treatment for this literally 2 weeks ago. And this is basically the first time I think a government agency has funded this kind of treatment. And it's not cheap. We're talking between $30,000 to $35,000 per course of treatment for each individual. And the requirements that we're using to manage this are actually relatively quite strict as well. And so from a departmental perspective, our guidelines are that the person has to currently have a treating psychiatrist and a treating psychologist. They have to have been in treatment for a minimum of over the last 12 months, continuously, but typically for longer. That they have tried other therapies and that there is evidence that there've been an effective duration at an effective dose for the psychological therapies and the pharmacotherapies, and that they're not using other medications. And in particular, those medications, psychoactives, so we'd consider medicinal cannabis and ketamine being the two primary ones that would be disallowed while someone is undergoing these sorts of therapies. The evidence isn't where the public would like it to be, unfortunately. And as clinicians and as, talking about treatments that are publicly funded, they are significantly expensive, and the body of evidence isn't necessarily there to say that they actually work to the standard that people would like them to work. And you can see this from, the applications through the Federal Drug Administration in the US, and the fact that still hasn't gained traction in the US in that particular way. So this is an early intervention and an early form of experiment, and we're requiring quite significant outcome evidence to be able to, demonstrate whether this is going to be effective over the longer term, and therefore that it would continue to be funded.
Thank you very much. Professor Wadham, in your opening remarks, you talked about moving transition from defense to Veterans Affairs. Quite interested to hear the rationale behind that and the challenges that led up to arriving at that solution.
Sure, and I'll just say that John might be able to fill in a bit more of the departmental side of that. Look, we've recognised that transition has been a challenge probably for a very long time, but particularly during the last 10 to 12 years, there's been a lot of government activity around understanding transition. We had the Constant Battle Report in 2016 that really honed in on that subject matter due to some veterans that had taken their lives. There is a challenge, I guess, broadly about what are the interests of defence in being the key piece in veteran transition. And one of the narratives that comes out is around defence is focused on retention and serving those that are serving. And so the belief then is that they don't have all the interests in the right place to be actually leading transition. Out of the Constant Battle Report, there was the development of the I'm forgetting the name, the acronym now, but a departmental transition body. Do you remember what they were called, John?
Joint Transition Authority.
Yeah, JTA. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Now that had a shelf life of maybe 5 to 6 years, but it wasn't achieving the outcomes that we thought of, that we were looking at. There are a range of issues that we need to consider in transition. One of them is thinking about transition well before you leave. Another one is about sharing of information between Defence and DVA. So we have something in Australia. We have a card system in Australia, the white, orange, and gold cards. So part of that discussion was about trying to get veterans at least onto their white card and their claims sorted before they left. Another focus of transition is RPL, or credit transfer. So that's understanding the skills and experiences of veterans in different roles in the military. And obviously they're a little bit more difficult when you're in a combat corps to translate those skills when you get out into Civvy Street. But obviously, if you can recognise those skills and then find a pathway of education and employment in transition, then that's a better outcome than not being able to achieve that translation. So Australia is doing a lot of work in that. We've got the Department of Veterans Affairs has established a 3-round RPL process to try and get universities and post-secondary institutions to be able to facilitate that RPL.
Mr. I sincerely apologize. Just out of respect for all our members, I'm going to have to interrupt this wonderful trend of thoughts. Keep this for next round, sir. On that note, now I will advise you that Madame Gaudreau will be asking her question in French. So please make sure that you have the right setting, and she will speak for 6 minutes asking you questions.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente, et n'hésitez pas.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And please don't hesitate to ask me to repeat if need be. We're extremely grateful for you to be here, so thank you. I had the honor of visiting Australia to better understand your democratic system. So I don't have a lot of time, but let's get straight to the heart of the matter. My first question is for Mr. Wandem. In the 102 recommendations made by the Commission, which one, or what would you say are the top 3, the most important to you, the ones that have to be implemented to help your veterans?
I think the fundamental, and I think this is agreed in Australia, is that the most important recommendation is recommendation 122. We've had a lot of inquiries. One of the things that the Royal Commission found out was that there had been 57 inquiries since the mid-90s, 750 recommendations, and very few of them met. We have a cycle in Australia, which I don't think is dissimilar to Canada, where we have an incident, an inquiry, a report, and then silence. That's what is also called as a policy graveyard. In 2005, after 10 years of deliberating on military justice, we recommended that there should be an independent body to oversee redresses of grievance and some other issues like that, because the fundamental point here is that defence is all militaries are insular, inward-looking institutions that are somewhat sceptical of taking outside advice. So the argument goes straight away, and we look very strongly at the Canadian system to say, how do we create an independent mechanism of scrutiny? Recommendation 122 is an attempt to achieve that independent mechanism of scrutiny. And then what it will do is look at how the recommendations are rolling out, and any more cases that come up. It won't have prosecutorial powers, but it will have the ability to refer. I believe John can correct me on that. The other key recommendation, I think, is the call for a national study on military sexual assault. My research has personally led the way on this in Australia. We've got multiple publications and a few books on this subject matter. This one has been very, very hard, very intractable, very difficult to move. Can't even begin to tell you the history of it, but at the moment what we need to do is what we have in Australia is we have a class action. That's something that Canada has done in the past, and we also have begun to change the language away from sexual misconduct to really naming what it is, and that's sexual violence. So I think they're the two top ones. There are a bunch of other ones that are really important. Probably the other one that's important is the transition piece.
J'imagine,
Madam Chair, I don't have the 122 recommendations here, but I'm sure we can get them. Now, my next question is for Professor Lane. My God, you have an incredible life experience as a soldier, doctor, chief psychiatrist. I'm sure that we will benefit greatly from your advice, from your knowledge. And if there's anything else you can add following our meeting, I would invite you to send us anything you have, because it'll certainly help to bolster our report and our recommendations. So, 78 service members who actually died by suicide are 78 too many. I'm pleased to see that since 2007 you've collected data, and I imagine that certainly provided a lot of information. Now, I'm interested in your national suicide, your institute, your report, and when you will get it.
Thank you. That report, the plan, has actually been released, and I have actually sent that to the clerk. So in the interest of saving your time, the clerk has copies of the suicide prevention plan and the implementation plan to go along with it as well. Just to touch on what Ben said, I think that personally, for me, the most important thing is an independent body that collects data and oversees both suicide and suicide attempts and completed suicides, both from the serving community and from the veteran community. Because as Ben said, service cultures, service organisations and government departments can be quite opaque and, protective and secret by definition and by operation. And having an independent body actually allows the community to have faith that those services, those organisations are doing the best thing they can for their personnel.
I only have 30 seconds left, so I just want to validate what I seem to understand. In Australia, when a person's service has ended, there's no abandonment. You make sure that all veterans are able to access support and tools. People are not left bereft. Is that correct? Is there support? Yes or no? And that's all the time I have for now.
Yes, ma'am. And those wellbeing measures of finance, health, education and community still remain the biggest priorities at the individual and the community level for the well-being of any individual, and therefore the prevention of suicide down the track.
Merci beaucoup,
Obviously,
Madame
as
la
well as being,
Présidente.
Say, because I've allowed each member a little bit of extra time, so I want to make sure I'm fair to Madame Gaudreau. Would you want maybe 15 seconds to comments for Madame Gaudreau's question?
Thank you. So these wellbeing matters aren't just about healthcare. They're actually about having productive members of our society who have done so much and have so much more to give. And so the more support we give in terms of employment, the more they give back to the community, and the better we are as a society going forward.
May I have 2 seconds? Yeah. So I think we recognise veterans as national assets who we place a lot of investment in, and that we must invest in afterwards in order to give back to society. And that's a return of investment on the investment into them, the financial investment, but it's a return of investment on them and their families' well-being. So it's very important for us to support veterans on the way out and afterwards.
Thank you very much. For 5 minutes, Mr. Viersen.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks to our witnesses. Mr. Wadham, we've heard about, many people that have come to our committee have talked about what's going on in Australia as a kind of a bright light in the world. From your perspective, is what Australia doing working in order to prevent the suicide epidemic?
Well, it's a hard question. I think in the first instance, we've got a Royal Commission because it wasn't working.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's the main point.
Since then, since that, the rollout and the work and the psilocybin and all these things, have you seen it change, or is it too early to tell?
No, I don't think it's too early to tell. I think as a community, and there will be those that don't agree, but I think as a community, the Royal Commission was a very positive outcome. It really brought a lot of issues to the table, a lot of things that had been going through a sort of a cycle, like I mentioned before, of being identified, looked at, and then forgotten. So I think that this has really put all of that on the table. We've got a complete sheet now to go from in order to address things, and things are starting to happen. From the outside of the community, we'd like greater transparency about how those things are evolving, but that's understandable that the departments are getting down and doing the work. We have a very versatile and diverse understanding of the issues, as you mentioned, issues like TBI, different forms of alternative therapy, and also, focusing, like I mentioned before, on the social aspects, the DVA wellbeing wheel, which is if you can get people the pathways to success after service, then they're not going to need as much healthcare cost burden. So I think the future looks bright. I think there are many challenges. Institutions take time to change. DVA, I think, is leading the way. I'm from an outside perspective, I'm quite impressed with DVA. I think Defence have a bunch of different challenges and that they're working through. So I think overall, we've identified the range of issues. We've decided to tackle them. If you got to remember, 122 recommendations, only one that was rejected. The rest either in principle agreed. So I feel like we're on a good platform, and we have a community.
I think you're using an acronym that is not working for me. A DVA or Department of Veterans Affairs. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, VA.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we've identified the issues. I think we've got a strong sense of consensus, and I think that we're moving forward, and I'm positive about the future.
Okay, one of the challenges that we hear about is that every meeting we get a new group in front of us with a new solution, and it feels like our department is like, well, we have this one track to go through, or you have to be aligned with this particular organization in order to get funding. I imagine it was a similar problem in Australia. Have you been able to capture the kind of the range of different methods that work for different people?
I've had positive conversations with Alison Frame, who's the Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs, and other commissioners that say that they want to diversify the approach, that we've probably over-focused on the biomedical, and that we need to place some stronger emphasis in understanding culture and systems and the social health elements of
Has there been any particular system change to that end?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah, well, recently, this is a little bit on the downside, but recently the Department of Veterans Affairs has sent out issued a $25 million tender for something called VF Link, Veterans, Families, Learning, Knowledge, Community. And the idea of it was to take away the decisions about research that were being centred within DVA and to canvass the broader academic community. The principle of that was around real change. I think that we might have decided to stay with the same sort of model as opposed to really enhancing and improving the social health element of things. That's my bias, I admit. Right. We've got brilliant work. I'll finish now, but we've got brilliant work in psychiatry, psychology, and allied health. We need to do better in the preventative space, and I'm not sure we've taken that up as much as I'd like just yet.
All right. A few seconds left here. Mr. Lane, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I think one of the biggest strengths that we have at the moment is the way that we've engaged the community. And this is lived experience personnel, family members, and then ex-service organisations like your Legion.
How have you done that? Like that's what we all say, but how did you do that?
Yeah, and so it has to be done. So it has to be done at a local. So the systems within the policies and programs have to specifically and deliberately incorporate that lived experience voice. So something doesn't happen unless there is someone with lived experience in the co-development of whatever program is being rolled out. And rather than have one particular ex-service organisation, you go to the strengths of the communities that are there. And part of the program has been rolling out what we've been calling veterans hubs. And so these are centres that you then have services from whoever and forever and for whatever, including medical, including housing, all of those wellbeing sort of services. So that's the centre of gravity and a base for them to operate from so that they can then serve the community that they're based in. And this is actually really good because, you can have government services working out of the same building. You can have all the other support agencies, but because it's local and in a community, it doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be, it can actually, because it's in the community, it can work with and for the community. And I think that's the centre of it because our geography, like yours, big country, lots of urban centres, but what happens to everywhere else?
Thank you very much. I'm going to have to interrupt again. I sincerely apologize. Mrs. Hurtle for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for being here. Again, thank you for staying up late for us today. I'd like to start with everyone's favorite topic, last thing in the day, statistics and data. In Canada, suicide data covers a longer period, 1976 to 2014. Then I gather the Australian data, 1997 to 2021. So can you speak to the slope of the data over time? Are there peaks and troughs which stand out as trends which may have been a result of policy issues?
Thank you. Okay, Ben.
I'll go for a short one. I'll just say that I'll let John speak to that, but the short one important piece is that we began lobbying for a Royal Commission, understanding that there were around 380 veteran suicides since 1997. Over the period of that Royal Commission, over 3 years, we went from my numbers won't be exactly precise, but we went from 400 to 700 to 1,200 to 1,700. Now we're around 2,000. So what we have embarked upon is a strong centralisation of our data so that we have a much more representative understanding of the issue.
And noting that data is collected by an independent body which does data collection, analysis and evaluation for a whole range of other metrics for the federal government as well too. So it's reputable. I think the collection of that data was a watershed moment in Australia because, again, we weren't actually collecting data, so people couldn't say how bad the problem was. I think the Royal Commission itself was huge and was another turning point. And because of the work done during the Commission and then subsequently, since the report was handed down, 15 months ago now, the numbers are going down. But I think we need more nuance in the data about what a person's situation is when those kind of tragic things occur. And for example, I was involved in a calls to 911 equivalent from military and veterans in one of our provinces, our state's called Queensland. And the polypharmacy rates in veterans were enormous, something like 80% of veterans being on 3 different medications, which included psychotropics and sedatives like benzodiazepines and opiates. And these kind of drugs, and then we're now seeing more along the lines of the same with medicinal cannabis, make people impulsive and disinhibited and then more likely to do something quite risky at a specific moment, which massively increases the risk of a negative outcome for them. So those kind of that kind of data coming out and looking at what situations are prompting people to engage in those kind of quite harmful behaviours and potentially lethal, that's what we need to see more of.
Could I just say one more point? The suicide rates data does not include unverified suicides, such as single vehicle car accidents or attempts. So we're only getting a piece of the picture.
Good point. Thank you for that. Another question then about numbers to a point. The excess risk of suicide in the veteran community versus the overall population are 2 to 3 times higher for women than male veterans. Is this a result of suicides in the general population being much higher, population of men being much higher as a baseline? What, in your view, is the reason for the disparity in the excess risk found for female veterans?
Just some quick data, Ben. Yeah, so the rates of suicide in female veterans can be up to 10 times higher because the population of women in service is only roughly 15%. And so the rates can actually, in some people, particularly those who've experienced military sexual abuse, and I'm sure Ben would talk to that. So again, we're looking at the sort of the vulnerabilities and the risk factors that someone takes with them from service. And so this particular cohort that has significantly more vulnerabilities is much more likely to end up having a more adverse outcome than their male counterparts.
Yeah, and I would just say that the research we've done identifies that women have quite different experiences.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Madame Gaudreau, again, she will be addressing both of you in français and French for 2.5 minutes. Madame Gaudreau.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So what I understand is that there is a recommendation whereby any citizen not having gone through training, service, and post-service may not presume or even state they're in a position to provide service. What I'm saying is that I myself worked a lot with addicts, and I also worked in suicide prevention, and I came to the conclusion that even though we're talking to different to human beings, but veterans, so it's something very, very different. They've worked in a different culture and in a different life situation with people who haven't been in the armed forces can relate to. So, am I wrong? Or is the recommendation to refer veterans to organizations manned by peers is essential to support our veterans?
Yes, ma'am. Exactly. So the recommendations were about access to culturally appropriate health services, and that's been a big feature of funding from our Department of Veterans Affairs. It's a personal hobby horse of mine because you cannot give a clinician that kind of lived service experience, but you can give someone with lived experience, a paraprofessional clinical role to help deliver community-based programs which are focused around skills for improved functioning and improved interpersonal relationships. And those factors in and of themselves are significantly protective for, really poor outcomes like suicide, but also for other things as well too, in terms of depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, anger, all of those sorts of things as well.
Monsieur Wandam,
20 seconds, Mr. Wendam. Would you agree with the conclusion I had reached?
Yes, military service is unique. We're heavily socialised going into the Australian Defence Force or any military, and then we'll spend 12 weeks to 12 months being socialised in strong service experience, and then we can be out in a flash. So what we have, one of the other things we've done in Australia is to establish peer workers in Open Arms. Open Arms is our counselling service, and that brings veterans that have that experience in to work with other veterans to provide pathways to successful transition.
Merci beaucoup. Merci de m'offrir du temps.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me a few extra moments. I'm very generous today.
5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. I'm grateful for your service. I went to university with a former Australian officer, and we did a degree in war studies in King's in London, England, and so I've got some fond stories of university that I probably won't share, but he was a good lad, and he kept his end up, let me just say. One of the comments that was made, Professor Lane, in your opening statement was that 70% of your veterans are not engaged. Could you please unpack that for me and explain that to me?
Yes, sir. So when we talked about those people who died from suicide, roughly 70% weren't concurrently engaged or getting services from our Veterans Affairs. And that shows, well, it can be interpreted in a few different ways. But one way in particular is that those people who are being out, we've got roughly 600,000 veterans in Australia, and roughly 450,000 of those are accessing Veterans Affairs services and benefits. So we are helping a large proportion of the population, but there is still a proportion that are missing out, and by definition, they become more vulnerable, and that shows up in that particular statistic.
Okay. Mr. Wadham, do you have any comments with regards to that?
I think we understand that in service, identity, service and belonging, that's a bit of a maxim, is generally rock solid. Obviously not for everyone, but as a rule. So leaving is moving to a bit of a precipice, bit of a void where we don't have that identity, purpose, belonging. And I think those that engage with DVA or with the veteran sector, many will engage in what I call serving after service. So that means running programs or working with veterans to support them, provides that support and that buffer for those veterans. So those that go completely free don't have the same level of support, high level of social disconnection. Social disconnection to me leads to vulnerability to suicide.
Okay, I'm asking this out of ignorance and because I'm unaware of how your system works down there. One of the things that has, in our recent studies that we've experienced is that there's a blind spot. When serving members leave the military, they're left to basically fend for themselves. And so the question I have for you is, your veterans, upon release, are they sat down with the Veterans Affairs and or is it something that they have to access and go online and it's up to them?
Yeah.
No. That Joint Transition Authority was a program that was specifically set up to engage people with Veterans Affairs before they leave Defence to make sure that they've got medical coverage and the other sorts of things that they need. That access is then guaranteed in terms of them being able to put claims for compensation in through the department, but it's also supported from the other side as well too by primary healthcare and funding general practitioners extra money to actually see veterans now and coordinate care as well too, because having those fundamental things like financial support in terms of a pension or whatever else is needed, health support in terms of that primary care, so that then the general practitioner, the GP, can refer people out to other specialists as needed, and non-liability mental health care. And what we mean by that is you don't have to have a defence or DVA doesn't have to take responsibility for causing that condition. It just gets treated anyway. And that includes substance abuse as well, which is really important in terms of access and engagement in care.
May I?
Okay, I have Okay, sorry.
Just quickly, we have something called transition cells. So every brigade will have a transition cell. Veterans can go to that transition cell. There's also transition seminars where they go to see different organisations that might offer them different pathways. But the transition is variable, very variable. We know that the higher rates of suicide are with involuntary discharge and medical discharge. We know that a voluntary left have better outcomes. We know that if you don't provide any sort of planning and preparation for veterans, then they're more vulnerable than if they did have that support.
Thank you very much, Mr. Comey, and thanks to both of you. For our last questions, Madame Auguste also will be addressing you in French. She will have 5 minutes. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank you both for being here today with us and to help us. I would like to come back to the National Suicide Prevention Plan you talked about a little earlier. In Australia, how exactly does that work? And what were the outcomes, especially outcomes with veterans?
And I can't really talk to the outcomes with veterans, given that the strategy was only released a few weeks ago. But as I said, that document has been provided. But to talk to it very briefly, wellbeing underpinning the individual and the community, and driven by policy as well, and then policy and services at the government level. Because when we think about suicide, it's not just about how it happens, when it happens, who it happens to, and all of those sorts of things. It needs to be actually taken from a systemic perspective that actually talks about the individual, the community that they've come from, and the services that they engage with, and then the agencies that support those services through policies and various things as well. So prevention being a primary focus in terms of early help seeking, reduction of stigma, so early access to care, and again, this was discussed, but military competency and training, not just in service-related things, but in suicide and suicidality for healthcare providers, but actually members of the community as well. Then we talk about intervention and aftercare, and then postvention as well too, because what happens after someone has suicided is that bereavement can impact up to 134 other people in their immediate community. This is family, this is friends, this is various other things. That unfortunately can have a ripple effect, and we need to be dealing with the grief response that suicide has caused, and family members, community members, individuals, workplaces, all the other sorts of things need to have access to those resources and tools as well. This relies on a number of critical enablers, but governance, embedded lived experience, available and translated evidence, which we talked about before, and then actually having a capable and integrated workforce to actually deliver those programs that we've been talking about before. That's kind of what we're talking about in a nutshell.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. And to follow up on what you said about community, we here heard from several people who said they like being surrounded by peers who have served in the forces as support when they leave the armed forces. Can you tell us a little bit, both of you, about how you perceive a veteran's relationship with his or her peers and whether that can help?
Both Ben and I have done a lot of work on this and, look very, very strongly upon the need for that lived experience and that lived expertise because of the nature of service and then the shared understanding of values, expected behaviours and shared experiences and all of those sorts of things as well too. And when we talk about community, that's part of what we're talking about because an individual should be able to go to effectively a mini community in whatever part of an organisation or, wherever geographically that they are. And it's then up to different organisations and services to help that person fit into that particular community. And novel ways that it can be done include things like adaptive sports, and Canada hosted the games this year as well too. And I was the archery coach for our Australian team from 2017 to 2022. And so things like adaptive sports are a massive way of getting people into an adjacent community that also tends to attract a lot of veterans as well too. And so those are things that are outside government, outside, various things that people might think of, but that actually work really well too.
Yeah, we have a very strong veteran sector. Recent study showed that about 4,000 different charities that were attempting to address veteran needs. Obviously, only about a small percentage of that are core organisations. I mentioned before the idea of serving after service. One of the things that's been good about, or really interesting about the study we're doing on veteran suicidality in Australia, we have a partner in the US. Well, we're not getting the same comparative from the US because of the guns that are used in the US, so high fatality. In Australia, we have a high survivor rate, so that's what we're doing is we're talking to those men and women and working out not just what took them to the brink, but what brought them back. And serving after service is a key piece, and engagement in the veteran sector is a key piece.
Yeah. It's a key piece in the post-vention space as well too, and this is what we talk about when we talk about education and various other things too.
Thank you very much to both of you. I would like, on behalf of our committee, and I know it's a late night in Australia, thank you very much for taking the time to share your expertise and your experience with us. Again, thank you for your service, both of you, to your country. And on this note, I will be suspending for allowing our other witnesses to come. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam President and members of the committee.
resume for our second panel. I wanted to say thanks to our witnesses who are here in person and in video conference. We have as individual Mrs. Amanda Hatcher, here in person, retired Corporal Minky. He's the host, Operation Tango Romeo Trauma Recovery Podcast for military veterans, first responders, and their families. We also have from the Chronic Pain Center of Excellence for Canadian Veterans, Dr. Ramesh Zacharias, President and Chief Executive Officer, and Mr. Cameron Kowalski, Sergeant Retired Director of Operation. I'm going to be allowing Mrs. Hatcher to start for 5 minutes, and then each of you will have the chance to speak. Madame Hatcher?
Thank you. Good morning. Let me start off by introducing myself. I am Amanda Hatcher, the widow of Master Corporal Sean Hatcher, who lost his battle to suicide on October the 4th, 2015. Sean served 18 years with the Canadian Armed Forces, and during those years, 2 tours to Afghanistan. In 2010, Sean started to experience suicidal ideations that was observed by a close friend and member. The information was passed on to the social worker of his posting at the time, in which the next day she made a phone call to Sean asking him if he was suicidal. At that time, Sean stated no for fear of repercussions of his job. So the option was to post him out. Case closed. In February 2014, while we were posted to Gander, Newfoundland, Sean attempted suicide and spent 10 days in the intensive care unit of the local hospital. Upon discharge, there was no follow-up from the hospital psychiatrist, but he was told to go home and live normal. What exactly is living normal when a member is dealing with mental health issues? However, I made a call to the Employee Assistance Program where I was able to get both Sean and myself in for a total of 6 sessions. 6 hours in which we were informed that the program was not equipped to handle suicidal members, the first of many failures within the system. Sean suffered depression, anxiety, and at that time, undiagnosed PTSD. Not only was Sean battling his demons, but as his wife, I was going through the battle behind closed doors. Sean was monitored by the base physician at the time for only depression, who would turn to me for suggestions as my background was in nursing. While I was his wife, more pressure was added as I would monitor him with his medications, his mental illness, and whatever was necessary to get through the days, all the while wondering if he would attempt suicide again, as the risk was there. At no time during the suicide attempt of 2014 was Sean referred or received mental health treatments from Veterans Affairs, nor did it go on to screening for Cold Lake, another failure. Fast forward to Cold Lake, Alberta on October the 3rd, 2015, Sean attempted suicide for the second time. We had just arrived to Cold Lake August the 31st. He was transferred from Cold Lake Hospital to the Royal Alexandra in Edmonton, where he passed on October the 4th, with myself and our daughter back in Cold Lake. In January 2016, I attended the Board of Inquiry every day into Sean's death for 6 to 8 weeks. Upon the completion of the BOI with Sean's death, changes in Ottawa would be made within the CAF to benefit or help a member dealing with mental health or to help prevent further suicide. As far as I am aware, I'm not sure if any of these changes were made, as no follow-up with the family member of the deceased member follow. I do want to mention the support I received from the 417 Squadron and the Cold Lake base. I believe suicide in the Canadian Armed Forces today still very much carries a huge stigma, a taboo of such. I believe it is this stigma of suicide that needs to be openly discussed. More needs to be done for the mental health of the members who are active and upon release of the Canadian Armed Forces. These men and women serve their country with their lives, and deserve the treatment they need to function in everyday society. As we all know, some of them never returning to Canadian soil the same as they left. 10 years have passed since Sean's death, and while the survivor's guilt have eased, the heartache of his death and grief remain. Who knows, if he had received the treatment he deserved, he might be here today. I like to think. Now, as a widow, I don't think one ever fully gets used to that term. I prevail of the services of Operational Stress Injury Support, OSIS, but I am unable to utilize treatment or therapy through Veterans Affairs, as I am not entitled with my husband being deceased. Any therapy services that I have used in the past have all been on my own. Changes need to be made with the mental health system for the benefit of all members, active, released, families, and widows. September the 10th is recognized as World Suicide Prevention Day, but when you lose a loved one from suicide and mental health issues, every day is a reminder of how much more work needs to be done for the health and well-being in the Canadian Armed Forces, our veterans, families, and in the general society to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Hatcher. On behalf of our committee, I want to say thank you for your service, ma'am. Thank you for your courage and our sincere condolence on your loss. We will now invite Mr. Minke, retired corporal, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. The frustrating part about being here today for me is that I have solutions. I am completely confident that if I had a magic wand and could implement what I need to implement, we could drastically reduce veteran suicide. We could cut it in half today. But I have the knowledge. What I don't have is the authority. You have the authority here in this room today. All you got to do is listen with an open mind and an open heart. I'll do my best to make a case for this. My name is Mark Meinke. I first reached out to VAC, sorry for the acronyms, Veterans Affairs Canada, for help in 2017. I suffered for 23 years without help or diagnosis. In 2019, I started my trauma recovery podcast, and in an attempt to help as many veterans and first responders as possible, my mission was really simple: save lives and relieve pain by making help for PTS injuries easily accessible. I would hope that VAC has the exact same mission. Being in the system had me quickly realize that there must be a better way to recover from a PTS injury. I'm now in my 7th year of researching healing modalities from around the world. My show is listened to in 98 countries. And I've been working to find out what works and what doesn't. The good news is that I have found numerous healing modalities with significant efficacy. The bad news is that none of the most effective therapies are available directly through Veterans Affairs Canada. My podcast showcases a comprehensive list of healing modalities. As far as I know, there's no similar list that can be found on the VAC website. So I invite Veterans Affairs Canada to share my show on their site, or use it for reference, or simply call me, pick up the phone, and let me help them to be aware of the effective resources that are available right now. Numerous Conservative members of Parliament have joined me on my show to discuss veterans issues, and some of them even consult me on these issues. Unfortunately, I have not yet had a response from the numerous invitations that I've put out to other members of other parties, which is odd because I'm not partisan. I don't care what party anybody's with. So my door remains open to members of Parliament from all parties. If they would like my help in reforming Veterans Affairs, just ask. I'm here. I only care about helping the veteran community. That's all. A PTSI, post-traumatic stress injury, is not a weakness, nor is it a choice. And nobody is immune from being injured by it. Whether the injury is a PTSI, traumatic brain injury, CTE, concussion, make it simple. It's brain damage. That's the bottom line. It's all brain damage. The symptoms of any of these injuries are nearly identical, which is a problem with diagnosis, because the symptoms are just about the same in all of them, including mefloquine poisoning, and can be completely debilitating. I lost my first marriage. My business collapsed. I went bankrupt. My house was foreclosed on, all because of undiagnosed, untreated post-traumatic stress injury. Living with intrusive, living with intrusive, relentless, suicidal thoughts is exhausting. Being jolted out of my sleep by hyper-intense nightmares 2 to 3 times a night, devastating. The help offered by Veterans Affairs did not improve my condition. Instead, it made it so much worse. When the thoughts of suicide became more and more dominating, I told my OSI, that's the Operational Stress Injury Clinic, that's what we're provided with, that my assigned therapist, I told her, I'm concerned. I was worried that I was getting closer and closer to the proverbial cliff. And I was concerned that it wouldn't take much for me to be pushed off of that cliff. I told her. I told her that I had a plan, and that if I were to end my life, it would be by opening my wrists. Nice way to go. Her advice to me was this: hide the knife that you imagine you would use, and if you haven't done it yet, you probably won't. This is an example of sanctuary trauma. The one person who I was turning to for help, that I was vulnerable with, that I had the courage to tell her where I was at and what was happening to me, the one person did not catch me when I was falling. She failed the trust test, and I never returned to that clinic. After 3 months after that conversation, I attempted suicide. And it was nothing short of a miracle that I survived it. After feeling betrayed by the OSI clinic, I took responsibility for my own healing. And as a result, I've made a great deal of progress, I'm glad to say. Both the American Veterans Affairs and the Canadian OSI clinics, and this is something you probably don't know, so please write this down. They claim their success rate, and this is published in the American VA, a success rate of 12 to 16%. To be clear, this means that only 16% of Canadian veterans who seek help through Veterans Affairs actually get it, which leaves 84 to 88% of veterans who are seeking help do not receive it. Now, here's a very short list that hopefully you ask me questions about. Stellate ganglion block. Stellate ganglion block is very tough to access, but it is legal in Canada. That's huge. Psychedelics have been talked about in this room. There's both legal and illegal psychedelics. The legal ones is ketamine. It's a great place to start. Ibogaine. It is now legal in Texas, and it's starting to spread across the states, and it is a game changer. Please ask me about these modalities and more. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Meinke. I would like now to offer the floor for 5 minutes, and I think Dr. Zacharias is speaking.
Madam Chair, committee members, my name is Dr. Ramesh Zacharias. I'm the President, CEO, and Medical Director of the Chronic Pain Center of Excellence for Canadian Veterans, CPCOE. We're an independent, not-for-profit organization funded by Veterans Affairs Canada. Let me start by thanking you for giving us the distinct privilege to testify before this committee on this incredibly important issue facing our veterans today. Along with my work at the CPCOE, I have a specialized clinical practice treating veterans and civilians suffering from chronic pain. Joining me today is Sergeant Retired Cam Kowalski, a 34-year RCMP veteran. Cam.
Thank you, Ramesh, and good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. I'm speaking today as the Director of Operations from the Chronic Pain Centre of Excellence for Canadian Veterans. I've spent more than half my lifetime serving as a police officer throughout the country. I had a truly blessed career, but one which was enveloped with tragedy, trauma, and stress. It left an indelible mark on me as a human being. This topic strikes deeply into my personal and professional life. I've lost countless comrades and close friends to suicide, many of which could have been prevented. Following my retirement, a twist of fate through a kind Veterans Affairs case manager brought me to the Chronic Pain Centre of Excellence, where I assumed the role as Director of Operations. What I've learned in my time at the CPCOE is that there is a deep connection between suicidality and chronic pain. What is important is not just the stories you've heard, although they have no doubt been profound, but the research being done that provides optimism with those struggling in isolation. In my darkest days, I was only looking for a glimmer of hope. It took years to come, but there, by the grace of God, it did. The research we do at the CPCOE is essential to bringing education and knowledge to veterans and their families on suicidality related to chronic pain. And I'll turn it back to Ramesh.
Today, I would like to highlight the strong evidence linking pain management, chronic pain management, with a consequential increase in suicide risk. From 2012 to 2019, I served as a coroner in the province of Ontario. During my tenure, I was the investigating coroner in approximately 700 cases. Several of those were suicides ranging in age from 12 to 88. The motto of the Office of the Chief Coroner in Ontario is, "We speak for the dead to help the living." We need to give a voice to those who are silent today. Suicide is a complex public health issue. The processes underlying suicide risk are still not well understood. It also continues to be difficult to reliably predict suicide behaviors. However, much is known about the risk and protective factors for suicide and suicidality, meaning that any organization with a duty of care must do everything in its power to recognize and mitigate the risks that its members may be exposed to. An abstract from the Journal of Pain in November 2023 states, "Living with chronic pain has been identified as a significant risk factor in suicide. Qualitative and cross-sectional studies have reported an association between mental defeat and behavior in patients with chronic pain, resulting in suicidal thoughts. Recent data indicates that male veterans are about 1.4 times more likely, and sadly, female veterans are about twice as likely to die by suicide compared to the general population. Chronic pain and physical ill health significantly increases suicide risk. Timely, evidence-based interdisciplinary pain management can assist in reducing that risk. I recently presented at an open forum with 3 veterans, including Sergeant Kowalski and 2 CAF veterans. The 2 CAF veterans who suffered from service-related disabling chronic pain and PTSD shared their stories of how they had seriously contemplated suicide before engaging in an interdisciplinary pain management program. There is strong evidence in the literature that treating chronic pain can and will reduce the suicide risk in Canadian male and female veterans. We need to keep hope alive. It is time for all of us to speak for the dead, to help the living. Thank you, and we're now happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you for your service. We will start our rounds with 6 minutes for Mr. Richards.
First of all, thank you to all of you for being here. Thank you, to our veterans for your service to our country. In particular, thanks to Mark and Amanda for your courage in sharing your personal stories with us to help make sure that others don't have to go through what you've gone through. And also to our other witnesses, thank you for what you do to help to serve our veteran community. I'm going to start with you, Mark. You mentioned in your podcast, which you've been doing for a number of years now, focused on trauma recovery. So the question I have for you is, what would you say is the biggest barrier to trauma recovery amongst veterans in Canada?
Probably stigma, which is a lot better today than it was 5 years ago. Stigma and access. So Veterans Affairs Canada has some decent programs and benefits, but try to get to them. It is a gauntlet. So this is why I consider it predatory. It's like horrible on purpose. One of the symptoms of a post-traumatic stress injury, and I'm hoping that we can somehow legally change the name of PTSD to PTSI. It's actually a big deal because it is a neurological injury. You can see it in a brain scan. But Veterans Affairs Canada makes you jump through flaming hoops of fire and dance on a meat grinder before you get the programs. Like the benefits that I received, what the 5 years it took me to get them, holy smokes. Most people, because they hear the stories, they don't even try because they're instantly overwhelmed. And that's a very, very, very common symptom because emotional regulation is the overall issue with a stress injury because your neurology is fried. You're on 10 all the time because you've just had too many fight or flights, so the throttle gets stuck on full. So you're always on, if you have a problem, kill it mode. And that's no way to live. But when you're already at 8 or 9 out of 10 for anxiety, and then here's 47 steps and 500 questions to answer, you just say no before you even start. So that's why we use service officers. Without the service officers, Blake, I wouldn't have benefits, and almost nobody would have benefits without service officers.
And I hear that kind of story way too often. It's either a service officer or a fellow veteran that happens to tell them how to find some way to navigate through the system from their own terrible experiences. You were in the room. I saw you in the room during the previous panel here. And the Australian example, they mentioned the idea of the fact that they have some of those services available, the mental health services and other things, on a non-liability basis. Basically, what they're saying is that they're not requiring that there be all these hoops to be jumped through to prove that it's related to service. They're just there to help the veteran. If we were to adopt a model like that, would that make a big difference?
Any bureaucratic barriers that you can get rid of will save lives. Okay. Just to get into my VAC account.
Can I?
Sorry, I'm sorry. Apologies.
I don't know how much time I have. Okay, so I'd like to move to a different topic because I've only got 2 minutes before I'll get cut off here. But I think you've given us a pretty good indication there. I know that you've talked to veterans. In fact, I know you were also one of the ones that helped Christine Gauthier, who was one of the veterans who's been acknowledged as having been offered medical assistance in dying and had it pushed on her. I know you've spoken to others who I've heard it on your show. How many veterans are you aware of who've had MAID pushed on them by Veterans Affairs? And how many caseworkers are involved in that?
So thank you so much for asking that. Last week, the week before, Honorable Mr. Casey made a statement in reply to the veterans that there was only one caseworker. He was quite adamant about it, but I hopefully can offer some information that shows that can't possibly be true. So David Baltzer is the most recent one that came forward on my show. He was offered in December 23rd of 2019. His veteran service officer was male. Now, when I was here the first time, that veteran service officer, who I can give you the first name if I'm allowed to do that, female. So at a bare minimum here, we have 2 different veteran service officers. Now, here's my logic about how there was 5 veteran service officers that little old me with no resources was able to find, okay?
Sorry, yeah, and you use the term service officer. Are you talking a case manager, a case?
God only knows.
Okay.
What, you know, they can call themselves whatever they want.
Yeah.
I'm using it as a generic term.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that.
David Balzer is the most recent. Veteran number 1 never used his name, but he did sue the government, won the lawsuit, and signed an NDA. The lawyers talked to me directly, said it was a life-changing amount of money that he received. But his service officer was female, and she was in BC. Now, one of my episodes, I called Veterans Affairs Canada, and I recorded the call, and I published it that anybody can listen to, okay? And all the same questions that were asked of Minister Macaulay at the time, I asked this veteran service officer. Completely different. The answers at this committee were completely different.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm so sorry. I have to interrupt you. We have 5 minutes. There'll be another questions to you on that side of the House, I'm sure. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
I thought we had 6 minutes. It was 6.
Oh, it was 6. No, sorry. My clock said 6. Marie-Hélène is very good. I apologize.
I have a moment.
I apologize. I'm going to allow the other Member of Parliament to address our witnesses. Thank you very much. Mr. Clark, for 6 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to all of our witnesses for being here today, for your service and your stories, and for those of you who continue to advocate on behalf of veterans. Thank you. Dr. Zacharias and Mr. Kowalski, I just wanted to ask you a few questions, if I could, around the issue of chronic pain, which I think, as you correctly identified in your opening statements, is a significant risk factor in relation to suicide risk. Is there any way to know what the prevalence of chronic pain is among veterans coming out of CAF and the RCMP? Is there any data on that to know how many veterans are actually suffering from what we would define as chronic pain?
Yeah, there has been the Life After Service study in 2016 that VAC published, and then subsequently in 2019. So people are aware in the general population in Canada, and frankly, through most of the developed world, civilians have 20% chronic pain. Male veterans in Canada are at 40%, twice the general population. And sadly, female veterans are at 50%. So when a young woman, lady, signs up to the Canadian military, there's a 50% chance she will be released with chronic pain and all the other comorbidities with mental health, sleep disorders, depression. So we have reasonably good data, and it's similar in the U.S. and Australia as well. Much higher incidence with veterans.
Mr. Kowalski, did you want to make a point there on that?
Thank you. Yes, it would be similar that of the RCMP with the CAF, because basically we train similarly. We have injuries that are related to our training and equipment, et cetera, that leads to chronic pain, led to my chronic pain. So the numbers would be the same or possibly even greater.
If you're comfortable doing so, Mr. Kowalski, could you explain for us in your personal experience how your chronic pain has contributed to any issues you may have experienced since you left the RCMP?
Yeah. So with my service, it was particularly long, 34 years. The equipment, I can relate it to a bunch of different factors, but mainly the equipment and the wear and tear of daily operational requirements of wearing 16 to 18 pounds of equipment, which is your use of force options, et cetera, around your waist, your vest that you wear for protection. Again, there's 1 or 2 more pounds. Your standing, sitting, marching, doing all of these sorts of things, but you're also, arresting people that don't want to be arrested. So the wear and tear is daily, but you have to remember that you also wear the equipment 12 hours a day, 4 days a week for 30 plus years. Everything weighs down. So in my particular case, I have osteoarthritis in my neck, in my back, in both knees, my feet. I have to have my hip replaced. So these are all related to injuries that I've suffered from my particular chosen vocation. And that doesn't even include the mental health struggles that I had as a result of what I did and what I saw and who I interacted with.
Thank you for sharing that. And Dr. Zacharias, if you could, you touched on it in your opening statement as well, that if chronic pain, and based on what you said earlier, obviously it's a significant problem with a huge percentage of veterans, of male and female veterans experiencing this, that if it's treated effectively, it could be a significant reduction in suicide risk. Is there a way to quantify that reduction in risk, and how do you assess successful treatment, I guess, would be the question.
Yeah, so we have, the clinic I work in celebrated its 50th anniversary 2 years ago. So over the last 30 years, they've been collecting data of both civilians and veterans who come through our program. And we published data, we presented it, international conferences. What's interesting is civilians do well, veterans do better. And the reason being is it's part of their DNA that got them into trouble, and it's their DNA that gets them out of trouble. Because they're very committed. If you tell them this is what they have to do. One of the CAF veterans who I presented with was one of my patients. When I saw him first in 2017, he couldn't walk 6 minutes. Today he has bicycled 120,000 kilometers.
Wow.
Takes vacations with his kids that he never dreamt he could have. And it's been a long journey. Does he have times when he slips? Still does. Still does. But he would tell you and testified before that audience that he was very close to committing suicide. And this was the hope that he got. Because when you can't sleep and you're having trouble with PTSD and with pain, there's not a lot of hope in your life. And so, sadly, too many of them take that course.
Yeah. Do I have any time, or? Okay. That's okay. Thank you. Thank you.
My glasses. Thank you very much, Mr. Clark. Now, so for our witnesses, Madame Gaudreau will speak in French, so just make sure that from a language you have it in English. Okay? Madame Gaudreau, pour 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Well, I'm actually remembering things now as an MP. I mean, we all have life experience, and MPs have collective experiences, and when we go through things, we have to make an effort. I put on a uniform for several hours. I'm a pretty fit person, and I realized how heavy this uniform was. It was even suffocating, and I couldn't even make it through the day. So I'm looking at you, Mr. Kowalski. You're a sturdy man. Are uniforms and the equipment, are they adapted to women's bodies?
That's a complicated answer to that question, but recently, yes, and this is across the board. This applies to not only the RCMP but the CAF members as well. Is the equipment was not designed, the training was not designed for female members. It was put into place for male members. The equipment was designed for male members, and this is dating way back. I'm not suggesting it dating back to 1873 for the March West for the RCMP, but it certainly was. They adapted the equipment to fit the female body and all of the equipment that was required for them to perform the duties that we perform with the CAF and the RCMP. So you can understand that there would be challenges and there would be problems that, as a result of ill-fitting equipment that...
Je vous arrête là parce que je me dis...
Sorry, I'm going to stop you there because all of the female service members who went to Afghanistan, for instance, did not have the appropriate equipment for their bodies. So really, we have not done well by women. I hope that's changed. So what are we doing about chronic pain? You've just talked about this. You said that this chronic pain undermines us in every way, and at a certain point, we just can't take it anymore. Is that what you're saying, Dr. Zachariah? Thank you for the question.
I'll recall a female veteran from just outside Ottawa who I treated about 5 years ago. She was probably 5'1". She was an outstanding scuba diver and did training for CAF. And she decided during her service she wanted to be a rescue person. So she was sent to North Bay, where she was given equipment, and the tanks were hitting the back of her calf throughout her service. So she ended up having chronic pain, complications in both lower legs, because those tanks were, and the vest was designed for men, not for a 5-foot female. So could it have been avoided? Probably. Are they doing a better job today? I don't know, because I saw her 5 years ago. But that was clearly an equipment that was faulty for her. It was not adjusted for height. And there's been evidence about shoulder injuries with female veterans because of the height of what they have to work on the aircraft. So I think people are more sensitive today, but so much more needs to be done. These are people who sacrificed for us. The least we can do is give them equipment. And frankly, we have a moral obligation to treat them when they have suffered.
Merci beaucoup. J'ose dire, en tant que parlementaire, là, on est des...
Thank you very much. Well, as parliamentarians, we're very aware, and we really want to work hard to change things. Ask any MP in the chamber, and everyone will say they want to do the best for their fellow citizens. So at issue here is political will. And you are helping us move in the right direction. But ultimately, decisions are made at the very top, because when we hear about the percentages of people who actually get treatment, 16% were relieved, but everybody else, some people get money, and it makes us feel better, because I'm sure that many of us are having trouble sleeping, and things have to change. Now, since I have a few seconds left, I'd like to say to Ms. Hatcher, I've heard you. I heard that you felt abandoned as soon as you became a widow. So please tell me whether I've understood you correctly. You felt abandoned right after your spouse took his own life. Is that right?
Thank you. I want to reiterate, I had great support from the 417 Squadron in Cold Lake and the whole base. I stayed there with my daughter until July 2016, and then we were given the last move with the military. It was after that I did prevail on some services where I moved here in Greenwood. But to be honest, it was as if, okay, now you're a widow, you're no longer part of the military. So I received my late husband's pension, Canada pension at the time. I started the process of seeing a social worker who, she and I, a lot of hours and tears to do, to open up a VAC inquiry into my late husband's death, because I knew it was service related. and I won that case, thankfully. It wasn't about the money. It was to honor him, pardon me, and that he served his country. But as a widow, it's so hard and difficult because it's still with you that you are a part of the military, but yet you're not a part of the military. And to be honest, even this year, forgive me for saying this, but I just didn't attend a Remembrance Day ceremony because it's so hard, it's so devastating, especially even sometimes hearing the bugle play. It brings you back to that moment. It's been a challenge when dealing with Veterans Affairs, as of course, being a widow, we don't have case managers or a service rep. I do still deal with OSIS from Edmonton for personal reasons. And the lady that I deal with, OSIS, I have to commend, she has been excellent. She has been a great support. But it's still, as a widow, you are, I don't want to say forgotten, because I still have so many friends that are in the Canadian Armed Forces and ones that have now released. And I still consider those a part of our family. But yes, becoming a widow, it appears like we are forgotten and just move on with your life, basically.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Et
Thank you, Madam Chair. That takes up my 2 minutes and 30 seconds out of respect for my colleagues. Thank you. Thank you very much. Madame Gaudreau.
Richards, for 5 minutes, please.
Sure, thank you. And I actually wanted to pick up where Madame Gaudreau just left off, Amanda, if I can. I'm still not sure I'm clear. Following the death of your husband, what help did Veterans Affairs offer you?
So, thank you. At the time, I was not dealing with Veterans Affairs first when Sean passed away. As I said, I started the process with a social worker in 2016, and I won my case in 2017. Honestly, there's not been a great deal of support as a widow through Veterans Affairs. There's no mental health, as, when you lose someone through suicide, it's a lasting impact. I always say I spent 18 years in nursing and 6 years, if you want to say, as a paramedic EMA, and nothing prepared me in those two occupations for the death of my husband through suicide. Even now, it's a challenge when, as a widow, we call Veterans Affairs. You call the 1-800 number, and every time you call, it may be, you may get someone who's really good, and then the other times, and I don't want to be rude in saying this, but you may not, and it's like basic information, and they're not equipped to handle widows and the situations that we are going through as a widow. So they're not skilled to deal with the situations that we are experiencing as a widow. And we don't have case managers as widows.
That's what I was just going to ask you. Wouldn't it make more sense for you to have someone dedicated to deal with, so that you wouldn't have to take the chance that you might get the right person that understands what you're going through, or that you might not have to retell the story of what you've dealt with over and over again? Would that not make more sense?
Thank you. It would definitely make more sense, but that, unfortunately, it's not the way it happens. I could call Veterans Affairs today and speak to a lady. Tomorrow, I could call Veterans Affairs and speak to a gentleman. And what the lady told me today versus what the gentleman might tell me tomorrow would be two different, if you could say, stories. And so you get off the phone and you're more confused than when you called in the first time, because it's not the same information given to you, but it may be the same question you're asking, but you're getting 2-3 different responses. So it's more confusing.
So I guess it would be fair to say that you would identify with what Mr. Menke described in his comments about all the hoops that he had to jump through. Like, ultimately, there is programs that exist, it sounds like, but getting to them is almost impossible. Would that be your experience as well?
Definitely. I can definitely understand what he is saying. I just know when Sean was alive, he dealt with Veterans Affairs for a shoulder injury. And I can recall at times when he would call Veterans Affairs for something, I'm saying so minor, I guess, compared to mental health, jumping through hoops. But I've definitely felt as a widow when I've called Veterans Affairs many hoops and no satisfaction many times.
Okay, so I've got a question, I guess that would be both for you and for Mark. What recommendations would you make in terms of how Veterans Affairs should improve that experience that, in your case as a widow, in Mark, in your case as a veteran, how could Veterans Affairs improve that experience so that you're not having to jump through all those hoops? Whoever would like to go first is.
Okay, thank you. I'll go first. I didn't know who was going to speak. Personally speaking, I think as a widow, as far as I know, there are no policies with Veterans Affairs for widows. They're not equipped to handle us. And so that could be a major change in the system, because I understand when a veteran calls, they're a veteran, they were a military member, but my member is now deceased. And so when I call, getting 10, 12 different people every time you call contributes to the frustration. So I think as soon as we, as a widow, are prevailing of Veterans Affairs services, maybe it would be a good thing to assign us a case manager, maybe even in this, like our home province. I was told I had I don't think it's called case manager, service worker in Halifax, and no disrespect, it was a gentleman. I was told we were supposed to receive 4 phone calls a year, basically like a check-in. I did not even know I had this gentleman assigned to me. So when I was told this by another gentleman, then I was told, well, he's off on mental health leave. So now you have a lady. I then received an email from this lady saying, no, I don't have you. So it's the confusion, it's the unknown that, do better. If I can say, I was told I had this lady, now you're telling me I don't have you, so call the 1-800 number if you need anything. I used the 1-800 number, the mental health line, first when my husband passed away, and it was in the nighttime. And I was told, unless you're suicidal, we only take suicidal clients at night, so I don't have time to talk to you, only 15 minutes. I won't tell you some other things that I've been told because it's just too hard. But things like that, assign us a caseworker is the most important aspect that you could do for a widow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Hatcher. Mr. Menke, 30 seconds just to answer Mr. Richards' questions, please.
It's a tough question. Everybody that I know that's been in the system goes through caseworkers or service officers or whatever you're going to call them like crazy. I think I went through 5 in 2 years. So I don't know what the national average is for employee retention, but I'm pretty sure at Veterans Affairs they're below that national average. So I think that's where you got to start. Find out why is it such a toxic work environment that nobody wants to work there for more than 3 months. Figure that out. Get some HR professionals, something. Figure out why do they hate working there, and what training is required to get them to do their job better, to empower them to be able to deal with us better. Because we're not easy to deal with when we're hot. We're a lot. We're a handful. And for them to not take that personally requires training. And all the hoops is what makes us hot in the first place. So being able to figure that out, the proper training, and figure out why in the world it's such a horrible workplace that causes that staff turnover.
Thank you very much, Mr. Meinke. Mr. Casey, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to start with the witnesses from the Chronic Pain Center of Excellence. And I want to ask you a question about the present state of treatment and research in chronic pain, and then talk a bit about what's on the horizon. So if you could address that, what is the current state of research with respect to chronic pain, and what are the most effective treatments or strategies today?
I can start with that, Mr. Casey, and it's a very topical question. I'm going to speak generally related to chronic pain and suicidality, and what we know, what we currently are doing at the Chronic Pain Center of Excellence. We recently conducted our priority setting process through the James Lind Alliance, which basically identifies what we're going to be studying for the next 3 to 5 years. It's an important milestone in our organization's history after we've just celebrated our 5-year anniversary of inception. So the 2025 veteran-led priority setting process, which is utilized using our Advisory Council of Veterans. There's 15 of them that represent what we do, and they identify what is to be studied each year. So this year, we rank them gold, silver, bronze. Our gold level stream of research this year is going to be specifically on what is the correlation between chronic pain and suicidality. So within that context, the outcomes or the objectives are to explore the relationships between chronic pain and suicidality in veterans, to understand the impacts on families and caregivers, to evaluate interventions at clinical, system, and policy levels, and then finally inform suicide prevention and policy strategies. So it is high on our level of research that we're going to be conducting over the next 3 to 5 years. But again, with research, it takes time to answer the questions that are being researched. So that's speaking to the topic itself on suicidality. I'll have Dr. Zacharias answer the part about the chronic pain research that is the generalities. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. I think one of the things we've tried to do is look at the Life After Service study, talk to veterans. When we were awarded the Center of Excellence, what I decided to do was go coast to coast. I started in Victoria, ultimately ended up in Newfoundland. COVID was in the middle of it, so it got into 2 phases. And I would meet with veterans and their families and said to them, I was the custodian of their center. What do you want me to do? So they were pretty clear. God bless you, Mark, for one thing about working with veterans, and I've treated probably 1,000 veterans since I went to McMaster. They will tell you exactly what they're thinking. And so, but God bless, I love looking after them. There's no filters. They tell you exactly what's going on. So we decided to empower them to direct us. And we created the Advisory Council of Veteran, and I think our chair testified here last month, Hélène Lesseler. They, along with their family members now, tell us what is a priority for them. So this is a priority process that's evidence-based, came out of the UK, and that's what we implement. So we looked at the ACVA report that came out in June of 2024. And so we have decided to take some of those items and fund the research around it. Most veterans get care in the public system, not from D&D, CAF. They get some care from VAC. So we're trying to raise the bar for civilian women, along with female veterans, to make their health issues a priority. And so we will be listing the 20 projects that we're going to fund over the next 3 to 5 years. So far, we've funded over 60 projects involving almost every university, but certainly every province. And we make one criteria. We will not fund you unless you have a veteran co-PI. So you get evidence from the people you're trying to serve as opposed to you telling them what they need. So it has been a incredible journey for us, and I learned from the Veteran Advisory Council. They completely decide what we're going to do in the next 5 years, and they decided for the last 5. So thank you so much for your question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Casey. So this will end our round of questions. I want to say Mrs. Atcher, Mr. Monkey, Dr. Zacharias, and Mr. Kowalski, thank you very much to all of you for taking the time to come and share your stories. I want to say on behalf of this committee, thank you for your services to our country. On this, I will ask, if it pleases our member, le comité souhaite-t-il adjourner?
Does the committee wish to adjourn the meeting?